My name is Jake Thompson, and I'm 28 years old. I've been working as a waiter at Bellissimo, one of the top restaurants in the city, while pursuing my dream at culinary school. My relationship with my sister Madison has always been complicated. Since childhood, she's bullied me relentlessly, constantly putting me down and making me feel worthless. So when she suddenly invited me to a dinner party at her place, I was suspicious but hopeful. I never imagined she would humiliate me in front of everyone and order me to clean up simply because I was, in her words, a pathetic waitress. Before I dive into how my sister's dinner party became the breaking point in our relationship, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to deal with toxic family members. Growing up, Madison was 4 years older than me, and our relationship was strained from the beginning. My earliest memories include her scowling face looking down at me in my crib. According to our parents, Madison had been the center of attention for 4 wonderful years before I came along and disrupted her perfect world. While they tried to include her and make her feel special, their efforts weren't enough to prevent the resentment that took root in her heart. As a toddler, I was oblivious to her dislike. I followed her around like a loyal puppy, wanting nothing more than to play with my big sister. But by the time I was 5 and she was 9, her bullying became impossible to ignore. She would wait until our parents weren't looking, then pinch me hard or push me down. If I cried, she would tell our parents I was making it up for attention. Madison's jealousy manifested in countless ways. When I brought home a drawing from kindergarten that our teacher had praised, Madison waited until everyone was asleep, then snuck into my room and tore it to shreds. The next morning, she watched with a satisfied smirk as I discovered the remains in my backpack. When I ran to our mom crying, Madison convincingly suggested that I had probably ripped it myself in a tantrum. School provided no escape from Madison's torment. She told other kids not to play with me, spreading rumors that I wet the bed or picked my nose and ate it. By first grade, I was eating lunch alone most days. The few times a brave classmate would try to befriend me, Madison would intervene, pulling them aside to whisper something that would make them avoid me afterward. "It's just normal sibling rivalry," our father would say whenever I complained. "You two will be best friends when you're older." Our mother would nod in agreement, telling me, "Madison is just adjusting to sharing our attention. Give her time." But time only seemed to make things worse. As we grew older, Madison became more sophisticated in her methods. Rather than simple physical bullying, she turned to psychological warfare. She learned exactly which insecurities to target, which buttons to push to make me feel small and insignificant. Despite everything, I still craved her approval. I remember being 8 years old and spending my allowance on a bracelet for her birthday, carefully selecting one with her favorite color beads. When I gave it to her, she put it on with a smile that gave me hope. That night, I saw it in the trash can beside her desk. My parents' inability to see what was happening forced me to develop coping mechanisms. I found solace in our kitchen, where I would help our grandmother prepare Sunday dinners. Grandma Rose noticed my interest and began teaching me simple recipes. In the kitchen, I discovered a sense of control and accomplishment that was missing from my relationship with Madison. By age 9, I could make pancakes from scratch and knew how to properly season a chicken. Cooking became my refuge, the one place where Madison's words couldn't touch me. Grandma Rose praised my natural talent, telling me I had good hands for cooking. Those words became a lifeline I clung to whenever Madison's bullying became too much to bear. My 10th birthday should have been a happy milestone. Mom had promised I could help bake my own cake, and I'd been looking forward to it for weeks. We spent the morning mixing batter and carefully layering chocolate frosting. The cake turned out beautiful, with my name written in blue icing and 10 perfect candles waiting to be lit. But when we gathered for the celebration, Madison, accidentally, bumped the table, sending the cake crashing to the floor. As I fought back tears, she offered a hollow apology that fooled our parents but not me. I saw the gleam of satisfaction in her eyes as I was left without a birthday cake. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Grandma Rose snuck into my room with a single cupcake and a candle. "Some people," she whispered as she lit the candle, "are threatened by the light they see in others. Never let anyone dim your light, Jake." Those words would stay with me for years to come, though it would be a long time before I truly understood their meaning. High school should have been a fresh start, but Madison's shadow loomed large. By the time I entered ninth grade, she was a senior, already established as one of the popular girls with a reputation that preceded her. "Thompson's little brother," people would say when they met me, their eyes reflecting whatever opinion Madison had planted about me. Madison had mastered the art of social hierarchy, becoming captain of the cheerleading squad and dating the quarterback. Meanwhile, I struggled to find my place. I wasn't athletic enough for sports, not musical enough for band, and too shy for drama club. The few friends I managed to make were fellow outcasts, united by our shared position on the fringes of high school society. Madison's popularity gave her new weapons to use against me. Her friends would join in on the bullying, creating a gauntlet of whispers and snickers whenever I walked down the school hallway. They'd make comments about my clothes, my hair, my walk. Anything they could target to make me feel like an outcast. The worst incident happened during my freshman year when I finally worked up the courage to ask Samantha Miller to the homecoming dance. To my surprise, she said yes. I spent weeks saving up for a corsage and renting a suit, determined to make the night special. But when I arrived at the dance with Samantha, Madison and her friends were waiting. She pulled Samantha aside for what she called a quick girl talk. 10 minutes later, Samantha returned with a manufactured excuse about feeling sick and needing to go home. Later, I learned that Madison had told her I had only asked her out as a prank because I had been dared to ask out the ugliest girl in school. The lie hurt Samantha and humiliated me. I spent the rest of the dance hiding in the bathroom, trying not to cry. After that experience, I retreated further into the one place I felt confident, the culinary arts program. Our school had a vocational track that included a well-equipped kitchen classroom and a passionate teacher named Mrs. Miller. Under her guidance, I flourished. She recognized something in me that my family never had: genuine talent and dedication. "You have the instincts of a true chef, Jake," she told me after I perfectly executed a complicated French sauce on my first try. "Not everyone can feel the food the way you do." Her words were a balm to my battered self-esteem. In my sophomore year, I entered a regional cooking competition for high school students. I practiced my signature dish, a reimagined coq au vin, for weeks. The night before the competition, I prepared all my ingredients and stored them in the refrigerator. But when I woke up, I discovered someone had added an excessive amount of salt to my pre-marinated chicken, rendering it inedible. I had no proof it was Madison, but the smug look on her face as I frantically tried to prepare a new dish spoke volumes. Despite the setback, I managed to create a decent alternative and placed third in the competition. Mrs. Miller was ecstatic, but at home, my achievement was overshadowed by Madison's acceptance into an Ivy League college. My bronze medal was displayed on the refrigerator for a week. Madison's acceptance letter was framed and hung in the living room, where it remained for years. When Madison left for college, I experienced my first taste of peace. Without her constant presence, I began to emerge from my shell. I joined the culinary club and even made a few genuine friends who appreciated my cooking skills and quiet humor. Junior and senior years were a time of slow healing. A chance to discover who I was without Madison's voice in my ear telling me I was worthless. My confidence in the kitchen grew exponentially. I started experimenting with fusion cuisine, combining techniques and flavors from different culinary traditions. Mrs. Miller encouraged me to push boundaries, to find my own unique voice as a chef. Under her mentorship, I began to see cooking not just as an escape but as a potential career. My first job was at Denny's Diner, a local establishment known for hearty breakfasts and friendly service. I started as a dishwasher but quickly moved up to prep cook when they discovered my knife skills. The owner, a gruff but fair man named Frank, gave me opportunities to create daily specials when the regular cook called in sick. Customers began to specifically request the young cook's special, which filled me with pride. Whenever Madison came home from college during breaks, she made sure to remind me of my place in her perceived hierarchy. She would talk endlessly about her internships, her professors, her connections, while dismissing my culinary pursuits as a hobby or temporary job. When I mentioned my promotion to line cook, she laughed and said, "At least you'll always be able to make your own meals when you can't afford to eat out on a cook's salary." Despite her cutting remarks, I held on to Mrs. Miller's belief in me and the small victories I was accumulating in the kitchen. I began to understand that Madison's cruelty stemmed from her own insecurities, though this insight did little to lessen the sting of her words. After high school graduation, while Madison was halfway through her business degree, I faced a difficult decision about my future. Culinary school was my dream, but the tuition was steep. My parents offered to help, but I could tell they didn't view it as a real education, the way they did Madison's business degree. Their financial support came with subtle hints about more practical career paths and reminders that cooking is a nice hobby, but not everyone can be a celebrity chef. Despite their reservations, I enrolled in the local culinary institute, determined to make my passion my profession. To offset costs and gain experience simultaneously, I applied for a position at Bellissimo, an upscale Italian restaurant known for its authentic cuisine and exclusive clientele. I was hired as a waiter, not a kitchen position, but I viewed it as a foot in the door. Every shift was an opportunity to observe professional chefs in action, to learn about wine pairings, presentation, and the business side of restaurants. The financial struggle was real. Between tuition payments, rent for my tiny studio apartment, and basic living expenses, I was constantly juggling bills. Some months I had to choose between textbooks and electricity. I took on extra shifts whenever possible, often working until midnight, and then waking at 5 to prepare for morning classes. 3 months into my job at Bellissimo, I met Chef Richard Moretti, the executive chef and owner. He caught me studying a plate of risotto as I was about to serve it, admiring the perfect consistency and artistic presentation. "You like what you see?" he asked in his thick Italian accent. "It's beautiful," I replied honestly. The saffron threads on top look like delicate gold leaf. Something in my observation must have resonated with him because he began to take notice of me. He'd occasionally call me into the kitchen to taste a new sauce or give my opinion on a dish in development. When he learned I was in culinary school, he started giving me impromptu lessons during slow periods, demonstrating knife techniques or explaining the chemistry behind various cooking methods. Under Chef Richard's informal mentorship, my skills improved rapidly. My grades at culinary school reflected this growth, with instructors often asking where I'd learned certain techniques that weren't in the curriculum. The dual education of formal schooling and practical restaurant experience accelerated my development as a chef. Meanwhile, Madison graduated with honors and immediately landed a position at a prestigious marketing firm. My parents threw her a lavish party, inviting extended family and friends to celebrate her success. During the gathering, I overheard her describing me to a cousin. "Jake? Oh, he's just a waiter right now. You know how creative types are, always floating from one thing to another. We're hoping he'll eventually find something more stable." These family gatherings became increasingly difficult as the contrast between our lives grew more pronounced. Madison would arrive in designer clothes, talking about client meetings and networking events, while I came directly from shifts smelling faintly of food and wearing my only decent shirt. The difference in our incomes was substantial. She was quickly climbing the corporate ladder while I was still earning minimum wage plus tips. The worst was a Thanksgiving dinner during my second year of culinary school. I had offered to cook, excited to showcase my improving skills. The meal was a success, with everyone complimenting the perfectly roasted turkey and inventive sides. As we ate, Madison raised her glass in a mock toast to Jake, who at least can fall back on his cooking when his waiter career doesn't pan out. The table fell uncomfortably silent until our father awkwardly laughed and changed the subject. No one challenged Madison's cruelty, and once again, I was left feeling diminished in what should have been a moment of pride. The contrast between our living situations became another point of contention. Madison purchased a luxury condo in the heart of downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. She hosted dinner parties for colleagues and clients, establishing herself as a rising star in her field. My apartment was a studio in a converted warehouse, with just enough room for a bed, a small table, and a kitchenette where I practiced recipes in my limited free time. My personal life suffered under the weight of insecurities born from years of Madison's bullying. Dating was particularly challenging. I found myself anticipating rejection, always waiting for the other person to discover whatever fundamental flaw Madison had always seen in me. Relationships would start promisingly but falter when my insecurities surfaced, manifesting as jealousy or neediness or an inability to accept compliments. The one bright spot in my social life was my friendship with Tina, a fellow waiter at Bellissimo. She was studying photography and waiting tables to pay for equipment and studio time. We bonded over our artistic pursuits and financial struggles, often sharing cheap bottles of wine after shifts and dreaming about our future careers. Tina saw the real me beneath the layers of self-doubt that Madison had instilled. She became my biggest cheerleader, celebrating even my smallest victories. And there were victories, though they might have seemed insignificant to others. Chef Richard allowing me to prep vegetables during a staff shortage, creating a dessert special that sold out in one night, receiving my first A+ on a challenging pastry assignment. Each small success helped rebuild what Madison had spent years tearing down. The turning point in my professional development came when Chef Richard suffered a minor heart attack and was ordered to reduce his work hours. During his partial absence, he trusted me to help maintain quality control, occasionally letting me step in to prepare certain dishes rather than relegating me to just serving them. These opportunities were precious glimpses into my potential future, moments when I could imagine myself as a real chef rather than just a waiter, as Madison always emphasized. It was an ordinary Tuesday when my phone buzzed with a text from Madison. I was in the middle of a shift at Bellissimo, balancing a tray of appetizers, and nearly dropped everything when I saw her name on my screen. We hadn't spoken in almost 3 months, not since the last family dinner where she'd made pointed comments about my lack of ambition. The message was brief and oddly formal. Hosting a dinner party this Saturday for some important colleagues. Would like you to attend. 7 p.m. sharp. My place. I read it several times during my break, trying to decipher her motivation. Madison wasn't one for family sentiment or sudden reconciliation. Every interaction with her had an agenda. A fact I'd learned through painful experience. Why would she want me at a dinner party with her important colleagues? I had nothing in common with her corporate friends, and she'd made it abundantly clear that she found my career embarrassing. When my shift ended, I showed the text to Tina as we did our closing sidwork together. "It's a trap," she said immediately, wiping down a coffee station. "Your sister doesn't suddenly want to include you in her fancy life. She wants something, or worse, she's setting you up for another humiliation." I nodded, knowing Tina was probably right. She had heard enough stories about Madison to understand the dynamic between us. Yet something in me still yearned for my sister's approval. Still harbored the childish hope that one day she might see me as an equal, maybe even be proud of me. "Maybe she's changing," I said, not really believing it. "People can change, right?" Tina gave me a skeptical look. "Sure, people can change. Leopards, though? Those spots are pretty permanent." She squeezed my shoulder sympathetically. "Just be careful, Jake. I hate seeing you hurt after these family encounters. For the next 3 days, I debated whether to accept the invitation. Part of me wanted to ignore it completely, to finally stand up for myself by refusing to participate in whatever game Madison was playing. But another part, the part that still remembered following my big sister around as a toddler, hoping for her attention, couldn't let go of the possibility that this might be different. I decided to go, but with protective measures in place. I would drive myself so I could leave whenever I wanted. I would bring an expensive bottle of wine as a gift, showing I had class despite her perception of me. And I would mentally prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. Saturday arrived, and I spent an unusual amount of time getting ready. I withdrew a significant portion of my meager savings to buy a new button-up shirt and tie, wanting to look the part of a successful professional even if my bank account didn't match the image. I polished my only pair of dress shoes and spent 20 minutes trying to tame a colic that had plagued me since childhood. As I prepared, memories of previous olive branches from Madison flashed through my mind. There was the time she invited me to a concert, only to forget my ticket and leave me standing outside the venue. Or when she offered to help me move into my apartment but showed up 3 hours late with no explanation, leaving me to carry furniture alone. Each memory was a warning, yet here I was, walking right into whatever she had planned. I picked up the bottle of wine, a Cabernet Sauvignon that had cost nearly a day's wages, and headed to my car. The drive to Madison's neighborhood took almost 40 minutes, from my side of town to the affluent area where she lived. With each mile, my anxiety grew. By the time I pulled onto her street, lined with expensive homes and perfectly manicured lawns, my stomach was in knots. Parking was limited due to the number of cars already there, forcing me to leave my old Honda nearly a block away. As I walked toward Madison's house, wine bottle in hand, I rehearsed potential conversations in my head. I would be polite but not overly eager. I would talk about my job confidently, without apology. I would not rise to any bait she might dangle. Madison's house was impressive, a modern 2-story with large windows and a beautifully landscaped front yard. Warm light spilled from the windows, and I could hear the murmur of conversation and occasional laughter from inside. For a moment, I stood on the sidewalk, gathering my courage. Then I walked up to the front door and rang the bell, shifting the wine bottle from one hand to the other as I waited. Madison opened the door wearing a black cocktail dress and pearl earrings, looking every inch the successful professional. Her expression when she saw me was not one of welcome but rather assessment, her eyes quickly scanning me from head to toe as if checking whether I met some minimum standard of presentability. "You're here," she said flatly, neither a greeting nor a question. She stepped aside to let me in, taking the wine bottle with a cursory glance at the label. "Come meet everyone." The entrance hall opened into a spacious living room where about 8 people stood in small groups, holding wine glasses and engaged in conversation. The atmosphere shifted subtly as I entered. A momentary pause as they noticed the newcomer. Madison guided me toward a tall man with salt and pepper hair who stood near the fireplace. "Brad, this is my brother Jake," she said to her husband. "Jake, you remember Brad?" Brad and I had met twice before at family functions. He was pleasant enough, though clearly cut from the same ambitious, corporate cloth as Madison. He shook my hand firmly. "Good to see you again," he said, seeming genuinely friendly. "Glad you could make it." Madison quickly moved me around the room, introducing me to her colleagues and friends. There was Carol from marketing, Devin and his wife Allison, Simon from legal, and a few others whose names blurred together. Each introduction followed the same pattern. "This is my brother Jake, he's a waiter." Not a student at culinary school. Not an aspiring chef. Just a waiter. With the slight emphasis that communicated her disdain for my occupation. I tried to maintain my dignity, shaking hands and making small talk, but I could feel myself shrinking under her narrative. After the introductions, Madison gestured toward the dining room. "We should move to the table." The main course is probably getting cold. I followed the group through an archway into an elegant dining room where a long table was set with fine china and crystal glasses. To my confusion, the table showed clear signs of a meal already in progress, or rather, already completed. Plates were smeared with remnants of food, wine glasses were nearly empty, and used napkins lay crumpled beside plates. I don't understand, I said, looking at Madison. Did I get the time wrong? Madison gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. No. Dinner was at 7, as I said. We started on time. She glanced at her watch theatrically. It's nearly 8:30 now. I checked my own watch in confusion. It was exactly 7:15. I had left early specifically to ensure I wouldn't be late, and traffic had been light. There was no way it was 8:30. But I'm not late, I protested, looking to the other guests for confirmation. Most avoided my gaze, suddenly very interested in their empty plates or wine glasses. Only Allison, Devon's wife, met my eyes with what seemed like sympathy. Oh, Jake, Madison sighed dramatically, as if I were a child who had disappointed her yet again. We operate on real time here, not restaurant time. When professionals say 7, they mean 7, not whenever you decide to show up. The implication that I was unprofessional stung, especially in front of these strangers. I wanted to argue, to pull out my phone and show her the actual time, but years of experience had taught me that Madison would only twist my defense into further evidence of my inadequacy. Brad cleared his throat awkwardly. Well, now that everyone's here, should we move to the living room for dessert and coffee? Madison shook her head. Not quite yet. We need to clear up first. She turned to me with a smile that sent a chill down my spine. Jake, since you've missed dinner and serving people is your specialty, would you mind taking care of the dishes? The kitchen's through there. The request hung in the air, so outrageous that for a moment I thought I'd misheard her. She couldn't possibly be asking me to clean up after her dinner party. But the expectant look on her face confirmed that's exactly what she was doing. You want me to clear the table and wash your dishes? I asked, my voice hollow with disbelief. Madison's smile didn't waver. Well, it is what you do, isn't it? I mean, waiting tables, clearing dishes, it's your daily routine. She laughed lightly, glancing at her guests, as if inviting them to share in the joke. Besides, you missed the meal. This way you can still contribute to the evening. Brad laughed, then noticed my expression and quickly sobered. Wait, are you serious, Madison? Of course I am, she replied, her tone suggesting this was the most reasonable request in the world. She walked to a sideboard and pulled out a white apron, which she held out to me. Here, so you don't get your clothes dirty. I stood frozen, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on me. My face burned with humiliation as I realized this had been her plan all along. The invitation wasn't an olive branch. It was bait for a trap, a calculated scene designed to put me in my place. One of the guests, Simon, shifted uncomfortably. Madison, maybe we should all help clear up. It's no trouble. Nonsense, Madison replied briskly. Jake doesn't mind, do you, Jake? He's used to it. I reached for the apron mechanically, years of conditioning making it difficult to refuse her directly. As I took it, Madison leaned in close, whispering just loud enough for me to hear. Try not to break anything. Those plates cost more than you make in a week. With trembling hands, I tied the apron around my waist, fighting the urge to run from the house. I began clearing plates, stacking them carefully, aware of the awkward silence that had fallen over the room. Most guests seemed uncomfortable with the situation, but unwilling to challenge their hostess. While Jake takes care of this, let's move to the living room, Madison announced, leading her guests away. Jake, when you're done with the dishes, you can serve the dessert. It's on the counter in the kitchen. As they filed out, I heard Madison's voice carrying from the hallway. He's always been like this, you know. Even as children, he was always more comfortable in the service role. Some people just know their place naturally. That comment broke something in me. The shame I'd been feeling transformed into a cold anger as I realized how deliberately cruel she was being. This wasn't just casual thoughtlessness. It was a calculated performance designed to humiliate me in front of her friends and colleagues. I continued clearing the table, my mind racing. In the kitchen, I found a sink full of cooking pots and pans, apparently left for me as well. I stood there, surrounded by the evidence of a meal I hadn't been allowed to share, and heard Madison's voice from the living room. Poor Jake has always struggled to find direction. Being a waitress is probably the most responsibility he can handle right now. Waitress. Not even waiter. The deliberate misgendering was the final straw, a calculated jab designed to emasculate me in front of her friends. I heard a few uncomfortable laughs, then Madison's voice again. Louder this time, as if making sure I could hear from the kitchen. I keep telling him he should be grateful. Not everyone can get a job as even a pathetic waitress these days. The plate I was holding slipped from my grasp, crashing to the floor and shattering into dozens of pieces. The sound cut through the house like a gunshot, silencing all conversation. For a moment, I stood perfectly still, looking down at the broken porcelain at my feet. Then, with deliberate calm, I untied the apron and folded it neatly. Footsteps hurried toward the kitchen, and Madison appeared in the doorway, her expression a mixture of anger and satisfaction, as if my clumsiness had just proven her point about my incompetence. I knew you'd break something. She started, but I cut her off by raising my hand. No, Madison, I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected. I didn't break it accidentally. I dropped it on purpose. Her eyes widened in shock as I walked past her into the dining room, where the other guests had gathered, drawn by the commotion. I placed the folded apron on the back of Madison's chair and turned to face everyone. I want to thank you all for witnessing what has been the dynamic between my sister and me for the past 24 years, I said, looking around the room. What you've seen tonight isn't new. Madison has been orchestrating moments like this since we were children, though usually without an audience. Madison's face flushed red. Jake, you're being ridiculous and dramatic. It was just a joke. I smiled sadly. A joke is something everyone laughs at, Madison. Look around. No one's laughing. And it was true. The guests stood awkwardly, some looking at the floor, others watching the unfolding scene with uncomfortable fascination. Brad was staring at his wife with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between confusion and dismay. For those of you who might be wondering, I continued, I wasn't late tonight. I arrived exactly on time. I suspect Madison told you all a different time than she told me. Specifically so she could create this scenario. That's absurd. Madison sputtered, but her protest lacked conviction. Is it? I turned to face her directly. Just like it was absurd when you told Samantha Miller I'd asked her to the dance as a cruel prank? Or when you added salt to my competition dish the night before the regional cook-off? Or when you tore up my kindergarten drawing and blamed me for it? Each example landed like a physical blow, and I could see in Madison's eyes the realization that I remembered everything. That I had been keeping score all these years despite my apparent passivity. I don't know why you've always needed to tear me down to feel better about yourself, I said, my voice softening. But I do know that I'm done letting you do it. I removed the apron and placed it gently on Madison's chair. I won't be cleaning your dishes tonight, or ever again. I won't be serving your dessert. And after tonight, I won't be serving as your emotional punching bag either. Madison's shock was quickly replaced by her usual defensive strategy. God, you've always been so sensitive, she said with a dismissive wave. This is why you'll never succeed in the real world. You can't take a little teasing without having a meltdown. Is that what you call this? Teasing? I gestured around the room. Inviting me to a dinner that was already over, then ordering me to clean up after your guests while you mock my career? That crosses well beyond teasing into cruelty. Madison. To my surprise, one of the guests stepped forward. It was Allison, Devon's wife, a petite woman with kind eyes who had seemed uncomfortable throughout the evening. Madison. I have to agree with Jake, she said quietly but firmly. What you've done tonight isn't teasing. It's bullying, and it's not okay. Madison looked stunned, as if she never considered that her guests might side with me. You don't understand our relationship, she began, but Allison shook her head. I understand what I've seen tonight. And it's not how anyone should treat their brother. Or any human being for that matter. Madison turned to her husband for support, but Brad was looking at me with new interest. Jake. Madison mentioned you work at a restaurant. Which one is it? Bellissimo. I replied, straightening my shoulders slightly. Brad's eyebrows rose. Bellissimo? That's one of the top restaurants in the city. Reservations are impossible to get. You must be good at what you do. Before Madison could interject, I continued. I started there as a waiter, yes. But for the past 6 months, I've been training as a sous chef under Chef Richard Moretti. I'm in my final year of culinary school, graduating with honors. Chef Richard has already offered me a permanent position in the kitchen after graduation. I could see the surprise on everyone's faces, including Madison's. She had so consistently presented me as a failure, as someone stuck in a dead-end job, that the reality of my accomplishments seemed to genuinely shock her. I've never been ashamed of being a waiter, I added, looking directly at Madison. It's honest work that helped pay for my education and gave me invaluable experience in the restaurant industry. The only person who thought it was something to be ashamed of was you, Madison. Madison recovered quickly, her expression hardening. Well, isn't that nice? My little brother has ambitions of being a cook. I suppose we all have to find our level. Her attempt to diminish my achievements fell flat. The atmosphere in the room had shifted, and I could feel that her guests were seeing through her facade. I should go, I said, turning toward the door. Thank you all for an illuminating evening. As I walked toward the entrance hall, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Brad, looking somewhat embarrassed. Jake, I want to apologize, he said quietly. I had no idea Madison had planned this, whatever this was. It's not okay. And I'm sorry I laughed earlier. I thought she was joking. I nodded, accepting his apology. It's not your fault. Madison has always been good at presenting her version of reality. From behind Brad, Allison appeared, holding out a business card. I don't know if you're interested, but I run an event planning company. We're always looking for caterers for our corporate events. I'd love to talk to you about potentially working together. I took the card, genuinely touched by her kindness. Thank you. I'll definitely be in touch. Madison watched this exchange from the dining room doorway, her expression a mixture of anger and disbelief as her carefully constructed narrative crumbled around her. I left without slamming the door, without causing a scene beyond what was necessary to stand up for myself. The night air felt cleansing as I walked back to my car, each step lighter than the last. For the first time in my life, I had confronted Madison's bullying head-on, and the sky hadn't fallen. The world hadn't ended. Once inside my car, the adrenaline drained from my body, and I found myself shaking. Years of suppressed emotions bubbled to the surface, and I sat there for nearly 20 minutes, alternating between tears and laughter as the reality of what I'd done sank in. When I finally felt composed enough to drive, I called Tina. You were right, I said when she answered. It was a trap. Oh, Jake. Are you okay? What happened? I gave her an abbreviated version as I drove, trying to focus on the road through the emotional aftermath. Come over. She insisted when I finished. You shouldn't be alone right now. But I declined her offer, needing time to process everything. Instead, I drove to Bellissimo, which was closed for the night but where I knew Chef Richard would still be doing inventory and prep for the next day. He had given me a key months ago, trusting me with after-hours access to the kitchen. The restaurant was dark except for the lights in the kitchen. Chef Richard looked up in surprise when I entered, still dressed in my dinner party clothes rather than my usual chef whites. "Jake? What brings you here so late?" I didn't answer immediately. Just grabbed an apron from the hook and began to wash my hands at the sink. "Do you mind if I cook something? I need to. I need to make something good out of this night." He must have seen something in my expression because he nodded without further questions. "Whatever you need. The kitchen is yours." And so, at nearly 10 o'clock at night, I began to cook. Not following any recipe, just letting my instincts guide me, transforming raw ingredients into something beautiful and nourishing. With each precise knife cut, each carefully timed cooking process, I reclaimed a piece of myself that Madison had tried to diminish. By midnight, I had created a dish that expressed everything I couldn't put into words, a perfect balance of flavors, textures, and colors that told the story of who I really was, not who Madison had tried to make me believe I was. Chef Richard tasted it in respectful silence, then looked at me with genuine admiration. "This is who you are, Jake. This is your truth. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I would never again allow Madison or anyone else to make me feel small. The apron I wore now wasn't a symbol of servitude but of craftsmanship and artistry. I had found my path, my passion, my purpose, and no one could take that away from me. 3 months passed, and life changed in ways I couldn't have imagined that night at Madison's dinner party. The Monday following the confrontation, Chef Richard called me into his office and offered me the position of head chef at Nuovo, a sister restaurant to Bellissimo that was opening across town. The promotion came with a significant salary increase and creative control over the menu, an opportunity beyond my wildest dreams. "You're ready," he said simply when I expressed doubt about my experience. "I've been watching you for 2 years. You have not just the skills but the heart of a true chef. The rest you'll learn as you go." My confidence, long suppressed under Madison's constant criticism, began to flourish in the soil of professional recognition. I found myself standing taller, speaking with more authority, and most surprisingly, no longer anticipating failure around every corner. When problems arose in the kitchen or with staff, I addressed them directly rather than assuming I was to blame. I also started seeing a therapist, Dr. Lawson, to work through the lasting effects of Madison's bullying. During our weekly sessions, I began to understand how deeply my sister's treatment had affected my sense of self-worth and my relationships with others. What we experience in childhood becomes our internal voice. Dr. Lawson explained during one session. Your sister's voice became your own inner critic. Now you're learning to change that narrative. The therapy helped me recognize patterns in my behavior that stemmed from years of emotional abuse. I had become conflict avoidant, often anticipating rejection before it happened, and had developed a habit of downplaying my achievements to avoid drawing negative attention. Identifying these patterns was the first step toward changing them. My personal relationships improved as well. Without the constant weight of insecurity, I found myself more open to friendship and even romance. I reconnected with old friends from culinary school and made new ones through industry events. For the first time, I was building a social circle based on mutual interests and genuine connections rather than convenience or proximity. About 2 months after the dinner party incident, I was surprised to see Brad, Madison's husband, walk into Nuovo during the dinner service. He asked to speak with me, and when my sous chef offered to cover the line, I joined Brad at a quiet table in the corner. "I wanted to apologize again for what happened," he began, looking genuinely uncomfortable. "And to let you know that things have changed since that night." He explained that after I left, several guests made excuses to leave early, clearly disturbed by what they had witnessed. In the following weeks, Madison discovered that Allison and Devin had declined future invitations, as had Simon and 2 other colleagues who had been present. Her carefully cultivated social network was unraveling. "The thing is," Brad continued, fidgeting with his water glass. Seeing how she treated you made me start noticing patterns in how she treats me and others. I've suggested couples counseling, but she refuses to acknowledge there's a problem. I felt an unexpected surge of compassion for Brad. He was experiencing what I had lived with for years, but unlike me, he had the perspective of an adult and the power to set boundaries. I'm sorry you're going through this, I said sincerely. But I'm not surprised. Madison has always needed someone to feel superior to. If it's not me anymore, she'll find someone else. Brad nodded sadly. I'm beginning to realize that. I just wanted you to know that what you did that night, standing up for yourself, it opened my eyes. After Brad left, I found myself reflecting on how differently I felt about Madison now. The anger was still there, but it no longer consumed me. I could see her behavior for what it was. The actions of someone deeply insecure, someone who built herself up by tearing others down. Another unexpected outcome of the dinner party confrontation was my relationship with Allison. True to her word, she contacted me about catering some of her company's events. What began as a professional collaboration evolved into friendship and eventually something more. Our first official date was at an art gallery opening, neutral territory where we could get to know each other outside of work contexts. I was so impressed by how you handled yourself that night at Madison's, she told me over dinner afterward. You stood up for yourself with dignity. That's rare. With Allison, I found myself able to be vulnerable in ways I never had before. I could share my insecurities without fear of them being used against me. She listened without judgment and shared her own struggles, creating a foundation of mutual understanding and support. The most difficult conversation came about 4 months after the dinner party. When I finally talked openly with my parents about the reality of my childhood with Madison, I invited them to dinner at my apartment, now a larger one-bedroom that I could afford with my new salary, and cooked them a meal that showcased my skills. Over dessert, I gently but firmly laid out the pattern of Madison's behavior throughout our lives, providing specific examples they had missed or dismissed. I described the impact it had on me, not to make them feel guilty but to help them understand. We had no idea it was that bad, my mother said, tears in her eyes. We thought it was normal sibling rivalry. We failed you, my father added, his voice rough with emotion. We should have protected you better. Their recognition, though long overdue, was healing. We talked for hours that night, beginning the process of rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of truth rather than the comfortable fiction they had accepted for years. In the months that followed, my parents made efforts to treat Madison and me more equally, no longer allowing her to dominate family gatherings or dictate the narrative. This change in dynamic led to Madison attending fewer family events, unable to adapt to an environment where she wasn't automatically centered and validated. While my biological family was in flux, I found myself surrounded by a chosen family that nurtured rather than diminished me. The staff at Wovo became a tight-knit team under my leadership. Chef Richard continued as a mentor and father figure. Tina remained my closest friend, cheering every success. And Allison brought a warmth and partnership to my life that I had never thought possible. 6 months after opening, Nuovo was invited to participate in the city's prestigious food and wine festival, an honor typically reserved for established restaurants with years of success behind them. The invitation was a validation of everything I had worked for, a public acknowledgement of my talent and vision. The week before the festival, I received a text from Madison, the first contact since the dinner party. Heard about the food festival. Congrats. Maybe we could talk sometime? I stared at the message for a long time, considering my response. The old Jake would have jumped at this olive branch, desperate for any sign of approval or reconciliation. But I was no longer that person. Thank you, I finally replied. I'm not ready for a conversation yet, but I appreciate the acknowledgement. Setting that boundary felt more empowering than any confrontation could have. I was no longer cutting Madison out of my life out of anger but making a deliberate choice about what kind of relationships I wanted to nurture. As I prepared for the festival, perfecting my signature dishes and training my team, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. From the little boy whose birthday cake was deliberately ruined to the chef whose food would be showcased alongside the city's culinary elite, I had traveled a path marked by both pain and triumph. The night before the festival, as I finalized my menu, I realized that Madison's cruelty, intended to diminish me, had instead been the forge in which my resilience was tempered. Every time she knocked me down and I got back up, I grew stronger. Every insult she hurled that I refused to internalize helped me define who I wasn't and, by extension, who I was. This realization wasn't about gratitude for the abuse, but acknowledgement that our deepest wounds can become the source of our greatest strength if we choose not to be defined by them. Madison had tried to write my story for me, casting me as the family failure, the perpetual underachiever. By rejecting that narrative and creating my own, I had reclaimed not just my present and future but also my past. The journey of healing is never truly complete. There are still days when Madison's voice echoes in my head, moments when old insecurities resurface. But now I recognize these thoughts as visitors rather than permanent residents. I acknowledge them, then gently show them the door. Family isn't always who we're born to, sometimes it's who we choose and who chooses us in return. My chosen family celebrates my successes without feeling threatened by them, supports me through failures without secretly rejoicing in them, and loves me not despite my imperfections but with full awareness of them. That dinner party, intended as one more link in a lifelong chain of humiliation, instead became the moment I broke free. Sometimes we need to be pushed to our absolute limit before we find the strength to say, enough. For me, that moment came when Madison handed me an apron and called me a pathetic waitress. In trying to shame me for my work, she inadvertently reminded me of everything I had overcome to get where I was. So if you're watching this and recognize yourself in my story, if someone in your life consistently tries to make you feel small, remember that their behavior reflects their limitations, not yours. You have the power to rewrite the narrative, to stand in your truth even when others refuse to see it. And most importantly, you have the right to walk away from anyone who cannot celebrate the person you are becoming. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to set boundaries with toxic family members? What helped you find the courage to stand up for yourself? Like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, the people who try to bring you down are already beneath you. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.